Talk to who?
Well, just tell me what your name is.
My name is Fountain Hughes. I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. My grandfather belonged to Thomas Jefferson. My grandfather was 115 years old when he died. And now I am 101 years old.
I can remember when the Yankees come through, and they carried my father with me and carried two sisters and one brother. And they left me, and I can remember when my mistress used to run in the garden from the Yankees and tell us if they come, don't tell them where they're at.
The slave trade in the district was frowned upon by abolitionists. They believed it was a disgrace to the nation and its principles. In 1862, the D.C. Emancipation Act was signed, ending slavery in the city. So the district offered slave owners $300 per slave to free them. Some of them rejected the offer and chose to sell their slaves in Maryland for more money, which was completely legal. White abolitionists were seen as heroes. They were some of the more humane whites of that time. They wanted us free, but not necessarily equal and without prejudice. David Blight, a college professor of history and black studies, said black and white abolitionists often had different agendas, and the whites didn't want Frederick Douglass to speak about northern racism. All of this is vital to the video. More than 50 years after slavery had ended, a new era was approaching, or at least that's what the sentiments was amongst the people. This photo was taken February 27, 1919. It was a welcome home parade. Black soldiers marched down Pennsylvania Avenue. They were being honored for their service in the war, not knowing that they would have to lace up their boots again. But this time, the fight would be in their backyard, because that same year in 1919, a race riot broke out between blacks and whites in many cities across America. But the black veterans stood up to fight, as well as the black civilians. They all stood up, and the Washington Post had this to say: 9 people were killed in the rioting. 30 more died from their wounds. And of all the race riots to erupt that summer, the one in Washington, D.C. holds a peculiar distinction. It's believed to be the only one with as many white casualties as the black ones or more. This period was called Red Summer. The term Red Summer was coined by a civil rights activist, James Weldon Johnson, because of the violent attacks and race riots all over the country. Let's get into it. A mob of angry whites started attacking blacks on the streets, pulling them off streetcars, and even attacking black businesses in the city. The DC police in 1919 at one point refused to help. Black folks had to respond. Whites were lashing out all over the country in more than 30 cities. They were hunting black folks. I'm talking white mobs, chasing them, beating them, hanging some of them. One was even set on fire. And they burned 5 black churches to the ground. In D.C., the white mob were veterans coming together with guns, pipes, and bats heading to Southwest, to a poor black neighborhood looking for a black man named Charles Rawls. There had been multiple claims of assaults on white women, and the law-abiding blacks of that time feared exactly what was happening. So a white woman named Elsie Stefnick, who had just got off work on Independence Avenue, Southwest. It was 10 p.m. She started walking home. She claimed she saw 2 black men coming towards her as if to assault her. So she screamed and they just took off, running away from her. Then her husband, who was in the Navy and connected, found out. And eventually the police got wind of it and began their search. But this very situation led to a married man, Charles Rawls from Southwest. So the question, why did they target this random guy? The only thing we know as far as documented evidence is the police picked them up, questioned them, and then released them. But the way history tells it, Elsie's husband and some other white men were mad that the police had let Charles go. Over 200 white men, many of them were in uniform, marched to Southwest, beating up blacks on the way. They eventually saw Charles and his wife walking and gave chase. And they tried to beat him at this location right here. But Charles and his wife were able to break away and make it home. Then the neighbors came out, some with guns in hand, and then the gunfight broke out between both sides until the police finally intervened. While this was going on, more fights were breaking out in other parts of the city, the same way, provoked by whites. A DC detective named Harry Wilson tried to enter the row home of an older black man and his 17-year-old daughter, Ben and Carrie Johnson, at 220 G Street Northwest, and there were a dozen white men outside of the row home pointing up at him. And the Johnsons was terrified, so when the detective came in their home, the 17-year-old girl shot and killed him. Some people claim this is what caused the fighting all over the city. Curry and her father was initially arrested, and Curry would later be tried for murder and found guilty after the riots were over. But luckily, she was granted a second trial where they dropped all charges against her, and they stated the young girl was in fear of her life. Then up on U Street Northwest, black veterans formed in the streets with their guns, as well as civilians. They all aligned with each other, came together as one like an iron fist. Groups of 50 to 100 black men got organized and then got active. They pushed towards the crowd of white men returning the favor, clashing on the streets. And this went on for 4 days, and the worst was July 21st at the Navy Hospital on 23rd Street Northwest. 4 black men fired shots at some recovering white sailors. This was war, and everybody was an op to someone. The city was going crazy. They shooting from cars, groups of whites and blacks fighting on the streets, armed with everything. People dying, both black and white. But the problem was bigger than some white woman being attacked or afraid. The problem was bigger than some alleged Negro thug. This wasn't even about that. Those white veterans were looking for a reason to attack an idea. The idea was the groups of people that were moving into the cities all over. They weren't looking to have them as neighbors. The city belonged to them. And blacks were only about 25% of the DC population at that time. And those numbers would grow and continue to grow. The flag was planted. We were here to stay. And now they came back for the city. Welcome to gentrification. For those who not stuck in the matrix, by 2045, whites will become a minority in the U.S., dropping below 50% of the population. The hard truth tend to scare some people though, but none of it matters. The Kardashev scale, for those who don't know, rate humans according to how much energy we consume. I've been following this stuff for like 4 years, man. Dr. Michio Kaku, Human Evolution, the Theory of Evolution, and it's interesting as hell. But on the Kardashev scale, we are still a type 0 civilization, and they rate us by types. Type 1 civilization, type 2, type 3. It's all on technological advances and energy consumption. It's not BS. The evidence and info is all around. So a type 1 civilization has the ability to harness the energy of its home planet, which is Earth, right? A type 2 can harness the energy of its home star, which is the sun. And by harness, that means they're going to build like a sphere. They call it a Dyson sphere. The Dyson sphere will wrap around the sun to extract energy, and that energy could be used for many things, maybe even light speed travel in the future. Imagine getting from Earth to Mars inside of an hour versus the 6 or 7 months that it takes currently. And a type 3 civilization can use the solar system like a damn gas station, extracting energy from many planets and so forth. They even have a type 4 and 5 intergalactic theory, but we still a type 0 and won't become a full type 1 for at least another 50 to 100 years, maybe. That's if natural disasters or wars don't stop us or prolong it. So at some point, man, humans gonna have to learn to play together. War is prehistoric. Anger over skin color is prehistoric. We have prehistoric written all over us in our essence, in our mindsets, in our behavior. Just like the idiots planning and doing these mass shootings in grocery stores and schools. They so dumb, man, so prehistoric. And by prehistoric, I mean outdated. They behind. We behind. Those mass terrorists, school shooters, they don't even know that humans, white or black, are not the next phase in evolution. You can't shoot your way into getting the outcome of killing off black and brown people. This is happening, man. Mother Nature, Father Logic. These terroristic ideologies, none of it matters. They just slowing down what's destined. But the truth is we all flawed. The organs don't last forever, and they have artificial organs, but come on, man. What, you gonna take every organ out as the aging process happens with no pushback from the body and mind rejecting it? Even the skin wrinkles and get old. We forever flawed, we prehistoric, imperfect. And folks don't want to hear it because we so naive thinking we the shit, but we not even the next wave. But we still got ways to go. I believe a type 5 is not even human. It'll be human-like, but not human. In space, humans got to deal with exposure to radiation. Who gonna build a sphere? Who gonna do long-term space travels? This common sense to me. You think a human would be able to adapt and stand long-term trips to a distant planet when this one is threatened? I don't think it's humans, man. So the fighting is irrelevant. We prehistoric like the dinosaurs. There's always another era. Ancient, early modern, the medieval period, Neanderthal. Our greatest advantage is our mind. So our brains will lay out the red carpet for the next phase in evolution. AIs, artificial intelligence.